Hello everyone, back to today's first video. We're doing JMA Friday for today's first video. As always on a Friday, we're having a detailed look at the weather for the coming month. This takes us into February, so we're going to the final month of the winter with this month ahead look at. Later on this afternoon, have a second video looking at weather next week to 10 days, seeing what the prospects are for bringing cold weather in from the east next week. So that'll be with you later on this afternoon. Before I get on with JMA Friday, just say about the ads. It's linked to articles on the pages. If you have a browse widgets and click through links, you have to pay for a website, and thanks very much for doing that. So we'll start off with the Japanese 500 millibar height anomaly flow charts, break it down into week periods, and then we'll have a look at the CFS after we've dealt with the JMA. So this is the first weekly period we're looking at. This is the coming week, the 13th through 20th of January. The brighter colours with these charts, orange, yellow, red, they extrapolate high pressure, and blue colours extrapolate to low pressure. So for the coming week, we find that we've got a ridge out to the north, and the northwest of British Isles also extends up towards Scandinavia and then over towards northwestern parts of Russia. There's a trough underneath that through many central parts of Europe. And overall, the flow here is going to be coming in from that sort of direction. So it looks like quite a cold setup, quite a cold scenario. And particularly the south would be bringing in easterly winds. Of course, those could be bringing in some really quite cold air from the continent. We go through to week 2, and this one is placing us just under a trough of low pressure, really. This looks a rather odd-looking chart, but week 2, going from the 20th, 28th of January, has a trough extending through much of northern and western and central Europe. There's a ridge over here in the central part of the Atlantic, heading up towards Newfoundland. And then we've got a bit of a ridge over towards the northwest of Russia as well. We're on the cold side of the jet there, under that trough, so I think there'd be wintry potential coming through with that. The mean flow is probably somewhere from the north, so I suspect there would be wintry potential there as going through to the latter stage of January. Maybe not quite as cold as week 1, but yeah, I think there'd be wintry potential in with that trough of low pressure. But it's a rather odd looking chart. Weeks 3 and 4, which takes us from the 28th of January through to the 10th of February, looking like this. It looks like we're trying to go back into more of an Atlantic flow then. We've still got a trough centred over just to the east of the UK, but we're also strengthening the ridge down across the Azores. Quite a lot of blocking though up to the north, amount of high pressure up there. Now this is transitional, or this is a 2-week period, so it could be a bit transitional. Might be that week 3 is still quite cold, and then week 4 is something milder. But there is still a suggestion there, quite a lot of yellow over top of the North Pole, so fair amount of blocking is still there. But overall, I think it is a bit milder there. The jet stream is coming back north, and it's still unsettled, especially so for the northern part of the country. But I think the flow is a little bit more off the Atlantic. So have a look at the mid-latitude and tropical view and see what temperatures and precipitation are doing with the JMA. Again, reminder of week 1 where we have a ridge out to the north and west. It's also extending up to the northeast as well, which probably, particularly for the south, leaves us in an easterly type flow. So the temperature anomalies for northern parts of the country in the coming week, again, this going from the 13th to 20th of January, northern parts are a little bit milder than average or near normal. Southern areas look cold, and most of Europe also well and truly locked in the freezer through the coming week. So a very cold week coming up for much of Europe, and I think that will extend particularly into the south and east of the country at times. The precipitation anomaly with a lot of high pressure around, expected to be fairly dry. That's what it's showing, a drier than average week coming up. So cold and dry really for the coming week. Week 2 is that rather odd looking chart. This is the 20th through 28th of January. We've got that trough extending across much of central, northern and western Europe as well. The temperature anomaly is still on the cooler side. This time it's colder to the north and closer to normal to the south, but I think overall still suggesting really fairly cold temperatures there going through to the end of January, and it's a lot more unsettled as well. So cold and dry for the first week, particularly for the south and the east, and then quite cold and unsettled for the second week, and this takes us up to the end of January, which will probably come out as a colder than average month if it came off like this. And then we go through to weeks 3 and 4, which takes us into the start of February. This is going from the 28th of January through to the 10th of February. And what we find with this one is that we are strengthening the ridge around the Azores. We've got low pressure just to the north of the country. And I think the flow is becoming more Atlantic based. Again, it's a 2-weekly period, so it could be that you can have 1 week offsetting another week. But overall, for the 2 weeks, probably seeing the winds going more towards the Atlantic, which does have the effect of lifting the temperature. So it's going to start of February. It looks like we're starting to become milder, and the precipitation anomaly, that still looks generally above average, so milder and wet as we go into the start of February. That's how the JMA is looking. What about CFS V2? So these, again, bifocal bit of our heights break it down into weekly periods. The first week period takes from the 13th through to 17th of January. Very good representation for this week of what the JMA is doing. We've got the ridge out to the north and west, also extending to this ridge up to the northeast. Trough through many central parts of Europe, which leads to mean wind flow coming in from the east or the northeast, which you would expect to be really quite a cold direction, particularly so for the south of the country. Week 2 is different to the JMA. This is when we've got that rather odd chart with the trough just extending through most of central and northern and western Europe. But CFS for the 20th through 26th of January is showing quite a lot of blocking around Greenland, actually going up towards Iceland. That's very extensive northern blocking. We've got trough underneath it. And overall, I think we're still bringing winds in from the east. So that will, I think, will be another really cold week actually there, particularly again for the south, but this time with the high pressure, the above average heights, extending more towards Greenland and Iceland, we're probably bringing colder air into the north as well. So that looks like it's staying potentially very cold, I would have thought, right through towards the end of January. Week 3 looks like this, which takes us from the 27th of January to the 2nd of February. Big change taking place this week. We're losing all of that blocking up to the north, and we're setting up low pressure in the Atlantic, and generally I think we're turning winds more Atlantic based. So this might be a bit transitional starting off. It's a very big change what we have in week 2, so we probably start off in week 3 still with a fair amount of northern blocking, then it all breaks down. So probably becoming more Atlantic dominated and milder there as we go through to early February. And then we go through to week 4, which is the 3rd of February through to the 9th. And different again, we've got a big ridge this time extending through Scandinavia and down into western parts of Russia. We've got a trough becoming blocked out to the west of us. So very difficult to say what happens there. We're probably doing something like that with the flow. So it could be that we're bringing up milder air from the southeast, but very subtle adjustments will bring the air in from the east there. So I think we haven't better go into too much detail with that one. It could either be mild or it could be cold there. Very difficult to say. I suspect the model will show that it's mild, but with high pressure up to the northeast, there would be the potential, depending on how it all sets up, to get some colder weather. So for the coming week, the temperature anomaly with CFS V2, again this is 13th to 19th of January, coming out colder than average, particularly for England and Wales. Again, very similar to the JMA, with much of Europe well and truly locked into the freezer. And week 2 is also looking very cold as well, and it's even colder up in the north of the country. Again, most of Europe firmly locked into the freezer. That's the 20th to the 26th of January. So 2 weeks there of solidly really cold weather showing up with the CFS V2 this morning, which would deliver substantially colder than average January, I would have thought. Very good news for regards whether this winter forecast, of course. We go through to week 3, which is the 27th of January to the 2nd of February. Still looks a bit colder than average, but this is when it's turning more unsettled from the Atlantic, so it's a bit transitional. A bit colder than average still for the south, milder than average for the north. The trend would be to turn it milder for all of us at the very end of January into start of February. And then week 4, which takes us from the 3rd to the the 9th of February, that just comes out milder than average. Most of Europe also going milder than average. Again, not sure about that. There is a lot of high pressure up to the northeast. The exact orientation of the high pressure would determine whether cold air begins to filter back in from the east or not. But anyway, that's into week 4. It's into February, so we won't be too concerned about that. The general idea from both of these ones is to keep it pretty cold for much of January now. So it could be that they're going a bit over top. We've now gone into this cold pattern that we're in right now, and it could be the models are responding too much to that and just swinging too much the other way. But if we take what they're showing at face value, it looks like we've got a couple of weeks of cold weather coming up, potentially very cold at times, and then the trend is to turn things milder into February. We'll see whether that does indeed come off or not, but before we get to that, looks like we've got a couple of weeks of really quite cold and potentially wintry conditions. And in a little while, I'll do today's second video looking at the weather next week to 10 days and seeing what is going on there in terms of wintry potential and seeing what those temperatures are doing next week. Right, that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Come back later.